So, in a year of the underdogs and unexpected, it's Luke Humphries and Luke Littler, the two players who contested last year's World Championship final, who've won the last two major tournaments in the Grand Slam and the Players' Championship final. So now, with Dartmouth just around the corner, things are perfectly poised for potentially the most intriguing 3 weeks at Alexandra Palace. Glen, Durrant and Matt Edgar have joined me to discuss the upcoming World Championship as cool hand Luke Humphries looks to become just the fourth player in history to successfully defend the title. But fellas, before we get into that, this year we've seen 21 different winners on the floor, some surprise major winners as well. We used to head to the World Championship thinking realistically only 3 or 4 players had a good chance of being victorious. That's not the case at all anymore. How much of things changed and evolved maybe just in the last 12 months, does it?
I think first of all, it's been a fantastic season. I mean, you wouldn't mention 2024 without the whole Luke Littler story and the way that Luke Humphries is, sort of, retained trophies, played incredibly well, a fantastic ambassador. I just think he speaks so well. But then we've had this crazy mid part of the season as well, where we've had underdogs. The Richie Edhouse story was wonderful. The emergence finally of Mike Dedeker and fantastic wins at the beginning of the season for Stephen Bunting and Dimitri Vandenberg. So it's been a wonderful season, but two names on the stage, Luke and Luke, still stand out for me.
Things are constantly evolving. There's things developing all the time in this sport, and it's incredibly exciting, isn't it?
It is, and certainly you mentioned the Masters there. What a great start it is for new tour card holders or opportunities for the lower ranked players there to play in the World Masters, but then the UK Open following it up not long after as well. So I know certainly if I was a new player now getting onto the tour, I'd be so excited at the prospect that you can now hit the ground running. And there's genuine opportunity there now because most players, they want a pathway, they want an opportunity. You want an opportunity to play on the big stages. And you've got that really early now. 2 chances, a couple of Pro Tours in between. What an excellent way to step into the PDC now that they've created with the World Masters.
Yeah, and it really is the most wonderful time of the year. And December isn't really December without the darts at Ali Pali. To celebrate, SBK are giving you a winnings boost to use on every single day of the tournament this year. Remember, T's and C's apply 18 plus, and please gamble responsibly. But for all the talk about Mike Dedeker winning the Grand Prix, Richie Edhouse winning the European Championship, always believe in the sleeve. 9 different Euro Tour winners as well. It is Luke Humphries who comes into the big one off the back of a big win. Who for you, though, is the most informed player coming into the world?
Well, I mean, if you look at the stats in the last two major tournaments, Luke Littler has averaged over 100 in every single game. I think he's amazing. I think he's doing things on the dartboard that I haven't seen since the very best of Michael Van Gerwen. And I sit here and behind me is memorabilia of the greatest of all time, Phil Taylor. And he just seems to be taking things to a new level. But what also impresses me is him as a person, and I think he goes into it in fantastic form. But that's not discounting the fantastic Luke Humphries. I think he's amazing. Only the second player to ever retain the Players' Championships. You go back to that incredible beginning of the season, the World Match Player in the middle of it. He's been absolutely fantastic. I think the timing for them. It's interesting looking at the preparation as well, Abby. Luke Humphries has been heavily on the exhibition circuit. Not something I would have done. I would have put some petrol in the engine and just done a lot of relaxation. I haven't seen a great deal of Luke Littler travelling around so far. I'm just wondering if that could be a big difference.
Yeah, it's quite interesting with a tournament like this, isn't it? Because it is so staggered. So maybe that's his thinking in the build up to the World Championship, maybe just to keep his arm in. But I'm not going to question anything the World Champ is doing, certainly. But Matt, when it comes to big averages, they don't surprise us anymore. Players dealing with big pressure moments in scintillating ways, it's kind of becoming the norm. But who do you think is that form player right now? It's hard to disagree, isn't it?
It is. I mean, but if we're looking a little bit deeper and we're going to go even further, we've got to look at Gary Anderson as well. When we look over 12 months or 18 months, he's been statistically the world number one. Now, he's not converted that in regards to wins as such yet or putting it together. But this, for me, is the tournament that he does it. Because an event like Minehead, I don't think that suits Gary Anderson. It is very, very hard to play a game in the afternoon and then play a game in the evening and then do it again the next day. And then you get to that finals day, you got to do 3 games. I don't think that sort of thing suits Gary Anderson. I think this does, where he plays a game, the draw works out right for you. You can play a game and have a week off at the World Championships. And I think that suits Gary Anderson. And I've been around Ali Pali at the same sort of time Gary Anderson's been playing. And he literally camps down at the hotel and he's in the practice room with different people, different paces. And he takes it more serious than any tournament on the calendar. And I think this, with the very staggered schedule of play, I think is really going to suit Gary Anderson. We may start to see him play well. And, look at the exhibition circuit that he's been doing. I've seen him putting in 118 average, 109 average, and he's been doing that on the Pro Tour as well. So I think Gary Anderson, when you look at form lines, he's one to take very, very seriously.
And with that answer, you have given me a tap in at the back post, so I'm going to take it, because the World Championship, as it should be, it really is a different beast. And for the big guns in particular, there is that real opportunity to play your way into form, isn't there? Even if you just scrape through your opening game, it just feels like a different tournament coming back after Christmas. So it leads us on to form against experience, I guess, on the bigger stage. What is most important to you, Matt?
Yeah, I think you've touched on it so much there in regards to sort of that scheduling the form, that breaking up into 2. Luke Humphries, the prime example of last year. I mean, he could have gone out in round 1. We've seen it as well with Michael Smith against Kevin Dotes, very nearly going out and going on a deep run. So I think that opening game is just very much get through it. Now, my Ali Pali experience was very different. Mine was I want to get to the other side of Christmas. And I think for most people that come into those early rounds, it's can I survive to the other side of Christmas? Where I think for players like Luke, they come into that and go, I've got to do that, and then the tournament starts. So that's almost like a prelim to them. And I think that's one of the exciting things about Ali Pali, because you've got 96 players there, but they're playing 96 different stories. Not everyone's there believing they're going to be world champion. And I think with the scheduling as well, it allows those players that are going there for that purpose to have that moment and to have that time where I can go there, get that first one done, and then I know what's working, what's going right, what's going wrong. I get rid of all that sort of nervous energy that comes from Alexandra Palace. And certainly when we look at the deeper stories as well, for people like Michael Smith, who we've mentioned, who potentially could go out of the world's top 16 with what he's defended. If he goes there as a good first round, goes home for Christmas, he comes back, it will feel so much more like he's attacking rather than defending.
Yeah, and with those stories, it's like you mentioned, you've got Michael Smith at one end of the scale trying to defend all that money to keep himself higher up the rankings. And then you've got the likes of Robert Owen, who managed to get in via the back door, really, into the World Championship. And you think that he probably needs 3 wins just to keep his tour card. So those different narratives, they're so interesting, so exciting. But Deza, what would you say in that battle between form and experience? What do you think is most important?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there will be a beautiful story come out. I mean, the best one of them all was the Luke Littler last year as well. The thing with form and experience used to be a real important attribute when you go into the biggest tournament of them all. I mean, Matt Edgar wouldn't know because he never won on that stage. Whereas I know what it's like to sort of win on there and sort of get that. But these young players now, Abby, there's just no fear. They don't worry about the big stage. They don't worry about the crowds. They don't worry about anything. The excitement is real. The talent's incredible. So I think gone are the days where you can put a big tick in the box where Gary Anderson's a course and distance winner on that stage. It's a fascinating balance. People getting there in good form, but we've seen so many times. I like the draw for Michael Smith. I think there's an awful lot of talk of him. But he's talking quite bullish, pardon the pun, about his chances. He has got a lot to defend. That's a scintillating section of the draw. Chris Dolby, Josh Rock. I mean, Gerwyn Price, and then there's a name, Wessel Nyman as well, who's it's just a really, and I think Michael Smith may have his own story to tell. So sometimes form can go out the window because you get on that massive stage. I mean, it's incredible. I went from the lakeside, which was intimate, it was tiny, the crowd on top, to like, it was a bit like Minehead, where you're so far away from the crowd. It was so big. So players might need to sort of get used to that as well. But I think if they're prepared well and go in there with real belief, they realise one good competition that can shot you up the rankings. It's a fascinating balance.
Yeah, and I guess it's like you've just touched on there, that experience now, because of the opportunity players are getting to face the bigger seeds, on the floor, on the Euro Tour, that fear factor is eliminated completely. But someone that maybe is still feared slightly, Luke Littler, of course, having the most breathtaking first year on the PDC circuit. He was the breakthrough star last year, but heading to Ali Pali this year, I think when you look at the draw, Duzza, you've just mentioned him, a lot of eyes go to the opportunity in that third quarter. And for me, it's Wessel Nyman who stands out. Yes, we know what he did at the Grand Slam, but also finishing the development tour year almost £10,000 clear of everyone else, picking up 7 titles, one of those finals with a 113 average, one on the Pro Tour as well. And he's consistently getting better, with question marks, in my opinion, over the likes of Dobie on TV. At least we know he's sorted his floor game out, but on TV, I think there are a few question marks at the moment. Cullen and Price as well. I think he has a really, really excellent chance of getting through that. But who do you think, Matt, has a bit of an opportunity to have a breakthrough tournament?
I agree with Vessel. I think that's an interesting play. I actually think, and this one may sound crazy on first inspections, I like William O'Connor.
Yeah.
I like William O'Connor. He's in a section of the draw that could really open up for him. He's a 500-1 massive outsider, but he is solid and he is consistent, and there's not much deviation in regards to his performance. The players he's up against, I feel, are a bit wavy at the moment, and he could really exploit that in Section 4.
Yeah, Duzza, who have you got?
Yeah, just great point, by the way, there, Matt, because that section to draw, Callan Ridds is somebody with bags of talent. Those last sort of 8 to 10 players that the section Chizzy's in could be very interesting. That's where you could get your rank outsider. But I'm going to go for the WDF World Masters 2 times. A guy called Wesley Plazier, however you want to say that. I think he's got raw talent. I think he's untapped. He'll be super, super excited. He's sort of about the best amateur out there alongside Connor Scott, which is another name to look out for. Tough section of the draw. However, the seed he's got, if he gets through his first round game, is Peter Wright. And Peter Wright, unfortunately, is in that section I've got where seeds are going into this competition in bad form. So I love the shout of Willie O'Connor at 500-1. But for me, Wesley Plazier was my choice.
Just off the back of that, Dezra, I'm going to ask you quickly about Connor Scott, because we know how exceptionally talented he is. He's got his tour card back for next year. Now, he is a player who likes to play in absolutely everything, isn't he? I wouldn't be surprised if I walked into my living room one day and he was on my dartboard. That's how often he plays. So going from that to only playing in PDC events next year, do you think that's going to help or hinder him?
Oh, it's going to help. And when you talk about attributes, as we mentioned earlier, if you now look at work ethic, then Connor Scott ticks the box. I mean, genuinely, he is playing 8 hours a day. He plays on a system that registers his game, so it's not like it's bravado. It's chat about, like Phil Taylor would often say, I used to play 8 hours a day. And then when I got to speaking to him, he said, no, that was just a psychological advantage there. Connor Scott is never off the ball. He loves the game. He's fit. He's a good lad who's just really enjoying it. He had question marks about him in the big games on the stage. He was a favourite going into Lakeside. He had a couple of opportunities. He was doing some sensational things on the floor in the WDF system, but now he's winning on stages as well in the PDC. He's another interesting one to look at for a tough section of the draw.
Yeah, Matt, any of the big seeds for you that might be going under the radar slightly coming into this? I guess for me, I'd say maybe Michael Smith, because I know he's not had the most spectacular year, but his record in this event in particular is absolutely sublime. Of the last 6 tournaments, he's made the final 3 times. And if he can piece all elements of his game together that he's kind of shown at different stages over the course of this year, he could be a real danger. But for you, any of the big seeds that maybe aren't being talked about enough?
Well, Michael Smith won it before, hasn't he? So how can you say he can't win it again if he's done it in the past? But Chris Dobey, if you look at the odds of Chris Dobey compared to the statistical data, they don't match. Chris Dobey over a 12-month period is the 4th best player in the world according to stats, above people such as Michael Van Gerwen. But yet he's 40-1. And he's in a section of the draw, that's section 3, where it could open up. But yes, he'd have to run into Michael Smith. But if you look at Chris Dobey and sort of what he's done over the last couple of years, when we move forward and we talk about things like the Premier League, and at the moment, it's such a wide open conversation. And I look at that section of the draw, and I think that's quite a wide open section. This could be a double whammy for Chris Dobey, who will relish the opportunity to get another chance in the Premier League. And if he can get out of this section, I think his name goes back into that conversation as well. So a Chris Dobey run here is sort of a double whammy for them.
Is there any seeds for you that you think maybe we're ignoring?
Yeah, just to add on to that, for me, Chris Dobey was the best player in 2024. Ali Pali Baron 4-0 up to Rob Cross in the quarterfinals, and all sort of went pear-shaped a little bit. I'm going to throw another name in that section of the draw, and I'm going to say, have we ever gone a full season where we haven't talked an awful lot about Gerwyn Price? Now, he does have Wessel Nyman in that section of the draw. He likes to be a headline act, and incredibly, we're talking about Michael Smith, Chris Dobey, Josh Rock, Gerwyn Price, and they're all in that 3rd section. I quite like the draw for Luke Humphries in the sense that Glen, you do realise he's got Barney in the last 32, Wade in the last 16, but I quite like that. I fancy him to get to the quarters if he produces the goods. Littler's in a tough section. Anderson's in a tough section there. So maybe there'll be just someone like a Ross Smith who'll just quietly but efficiently and effectively just get on with the job. There'll be so many stories to tell, but the name that keeps niggling away is 3 names, and 3 we've just talked about, all in that same section: Dobey, Smith, and Price.
Yeah, and looking at the outright market, there are a lot of tempters for me. For me, Mike Dedecker at 23-1. I know it's not the greatest odd, but I think that is so tempting in the same quarter, as you've mentioned, as Luke Humphries. But if he scores as heavily and is as clinical on double 16 as he was at the Grand Prix and for the majority of the Grand Slam, I don't really see why he can't go all the way. I mean, he's got by far my favourite throw in the game, and he's really developed that on-stage presence as well over the last few months. And one of the things that stands out for me with him is when he won his first Players' Championship title back in August, he said the thing that had inspired him was that he saw a list of all the top Belgian players of all time, and he didn't like how far down he was on it. And I really like the way he channeled those emotions to stop being, in his own words, stop being lazy, get up off his backside and put the time and effort in. I don't see any reason why he couldn't go all the way. I've got him coming out of that quarter ahead of Luke Humphries. But Matt, for you, anyone tempting you?
I like that as well from Dedecker, because a lot of the time when it's I'm going to go try conquer the world or conquer the rankings, it's such a big mammoth task that actually if you can break it down into small bite-sized pieces, let me try conquering Belgium first. Certainly at the moment I'm trying to conquer being the best player in my house, and then once I've done that I'll move on to the town and so on. So I get that sort of bite-sized sort of information. I think the bookies are running for cover here. I don't think they want to be as involved as they have been in the past, because there would have been value left, right, and centre before. Where, I mean, you've only got to look at people like Wessel Nyman. We've all sort of like highlighted him as soon as he's performing well, but the last time I looked at the odds, he was the 7th favourite to be the world champion. And this is a guy who's not gone on a run at Ali Pali before. This is a guy who lost every single game in the Grand Slam of darts. Yes, he played really well, but he didn't win a group game at the Grand Slam. And yet he's the 7th favourite to win the tournament. I think what's happened in the past, the runs of Mickey Mansell, the runs of Richie Edhouse, I think they're scared. And with that, I think it's a little bit trickier to find value than it normally would be. But with that as well, you're getting value. I mean, Michael Van Gerwen was 10-1 to win the World Championships. I mean, it weren't that many years ago. He was even money favourite.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, isn't it? Does it anyone for you that's taken your fancy?
Yeah, Matt said it right at the end there. I just wish Michael Van Gerwen hadn't been on the exhibition circuit, going into that competition where he's been practicing with Vincent van der Voort and really knuckled down for 3 weeks a month. Because if you ask all the players, his A game is still the one that's most feared. I've tried to go for value in an awful lot of the competitions this year. I've waited. I even had Chizzy to win the match play. He loses 10-3 in that opening game. I've gone incredibly safe. I do think it'll be Luke v Luke semi-final. And I do think Gary Anderson will come through Section 4. I've changed my mind on Section 3. But I think Michael Smith has a story to tell. My heart wants Chris Dobie. I mean, I've got Ryan Joyce in here on this dartboard tomorrow night. I think he needs a pep talk. Another one who's really dangerous there. Ross Smith, big 180 hitters. Dirk Van Dijvenbode is back playing well. Dirk's back hitting. He's the second biggest 180 hitter over the past 6 weeks. So he's back playing really well as well. Intriguing, fascinating, but my top 4 won't be many surprises. It's tough to come through the Worlds under that circumstances. Every player will be focused, every player will be determined, and I think it won't be a case of the year of the underdog at Ali Pali.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting. Someone we've not really mentioned at all in the top section of the drawing, Stephen Bunting. You wouldn't be surprised if someone like he went on a really deep run as well. But when you look at the bottom half of that top section, if you like, you've got Bunting, Dirk Van Dijvenbode, Scott, Damon Heta, Mike De Decker. It is so stacked down there. So Luke Humphries certainly got his work cut out if he's to come through that. But given that strength in depth in the game right now, and the reason why we're plucking all these names out is because more so than ever, anyone pretty much could go on a deep run, but there isn't such thing as an easy draw at the moment for the top seeds. But of those favourites, who would you say has the most favourable draw, Matt?
The most favourable draw, I'd have to go with Luke Humphries, and that's purely down to the fact that he just makes it look easy and he's just head and shoulders above most players at the moment. He's got Thibaut Tricol or Joe Comito, I believe it said, and I'm not convinced Tricol gets through that, despite the fact he is a massive favourite to win that game. When you watch Joe and you look at his numbers, and I think he's going to cause Tricol quite a few problems there. And the other thing as well is opening night. Like, no one wants to be on the open. You don't want to be out there because you'll be out before it's even begun. And you're sort of out the tournament, you're watching it, and it almost feels like you was never there. So Tricol's got all that to deal with. Joe's coming over from Australia. This is his big moment where Tricol is on a process. He's on a 2-year tour card. He's on a journey. He's trying to break the top 64. So it's more than just that one game to him, where to Joe, this is the final. This is the big one. This is a chance to go and play Luke Humphries. I would not be surprised if we get Luke and Joe in the opening game. And for that reason, I think Luke Humphries is probably the seed that's going to have the most cushy woe.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that was my original answer, but let's go back to something we mentioned earlier. The very final quadrant there, the Dave Chisnell section. I think there's a real potential for Dave if he's 100%. He's had issues with I think it's his back. But if he was 100%, Dave Chizzy, there's a real opportunity in that last section there. But for me, Humphries, like I said, Barney stroke Wade to get to the quarters is mega tough. But some of the other matches, and we haven't even said a potential Fallon Sherrick v Luke Littler. I mean, we haven't even mentioned that. But Ryan Meikle, he'll have something to say in that game.
Yeah, and he really has got the toughest draw, hasn't he? Because not only could he end up playing Fallon, but then Luke Littler in the next round, having the crowd against you for both of those matches. But someone else, I think, you mentioned Dave Chisnell there, and it is such a difficult one. The reason why I would stay clear of betted on him in any capacity this tournament is because when I spoke to him at the Grand Slam, he mentioned his back and he said he's had to change the way he's throwing because he's almost anticipating a twinge in his back. So where he normally leans slightly, he's not able to do that. So it's throwing his whole routine out of kilter. That's the reason I wouldn't really touch him with a barge pole at the moment. But someone he could potentially face in round 3 is someone that I think is worth mentioning, and that's Neil Zonneveld, because his form has really gone under the radar in the second half of this year. So I think he's potentially someone who could win a few games and is maybe going under the radar a little. But moving on from the easiest to the hardest, Humphreys hasn't really, if he does make it through his first few games, hasn't really got things his own way. But who do you think has got the hardest? I actually think Humphreys is one of them.
Yeah.
I actually think he's got one of the toughest. I know what you're saying in the first couple of games, but in that quarter overall, I think that's one of the toughest. Desert, what about you?
Yeah, there's no other section for me. I think Gary Anderson's got a really tricky opening couple of games as well. Luke Littler we've talked about there. Then you start looking at those proven winners, the Mighty Deckers, the Stephen Buntings. There's no section of the draw I look at and think they'll fancy that, apart from Wessel Nyman. I think he will fancy his chances against Joe Cullen. And I think that blockbuster game against Gerwyn Price, if he can go one set up, who knows with Gerwyn Price? What are we going to get from Gezi in this one? Wessel will fancy his chances. And I think the answer to that question is related to something Matt said. He's 7th favourite for a reason. And maybe the bookies have seen a path very similar to Luke Littler last year when James Wade went out early doors. All of a sudden, we were like, hey, the story could be brewing here. And maybe the story this year could be Wessel Nyman.
Yeah, and Gezi and Wessel actually played out an absolute blockbuster on the Euro Tour earlier this year as well. It was absolutely phenomenal. But Matt, for you, who's got the toughest section, would you say?
I've picked 4 players as seeds who I think could be in danger, and I'm picking them purely on the fact that who could be coming through the opening round, that preliminary to play them. Joe Cullen, Wessel Nyman. I think everyone's going to be going Wessel Nyman on that in regards to predictions. Joe Cullen's not been playing well. Wessel Nyman's been a different kettle of fish. I've got Damon Heta in there just because he'll run into Connor Scott, someone I rate very, very highly. I think he's going to win a tournament. Wherever that's going to be, he's going to win something good, whether it's on the Euro Tour or whether it's a major. I always think he's on a similar journey to that Nathan Aspinall did a couple of years ago, where he lost his tour card, played lots of darts, and then came back a different animal, different beast, won the UK Open. I think Connor Scott's very similar to that one. I agree with what Duzza said earlier on. Wesley plays here. I can see him getting through, beating Peter Wright as well. That will cost Simon Whitlock his tour card as well, which a couple of years ago, again, you thought would have been very unheard. But actually, the person I think is going to win the World Championship, I think is not going to have an easy passage here. And that depends on the result of the first game. That is Luke Littler, as Glenn said, potentially playing Fallon Sherrick. I think the attention on that game and the atmosphere in that room will be something like no other. And I think the viewing figures could be the same, if not more than what we've seen for World Championship finals before. And Glenn, you've played Fallon Sherrick yourself on one of those big stages, so you'll probably be able to share a bit more insight into this rather than me who sort of views it and like, whoa, this is just a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Nottingham Premier League on the back of my opening win to Michael Smith. It was scenes I've never played in front of. I mean, I never got much booze in my career because I'm such a likable person. But that night, it was incredibly difficult. But you know what? Luke Littler, just everything about him. I tell you what I'd like to say, Abby, is the fact that I went to the Premier League final this year, and a few weeks before, I saw Luke Littler play an Austrian guy at the European Tour when my mind's gone blank, and he didn't look like he fancied it. He didn't take his coat off. I think he threw Zoran Lurchbacher. I think he threw 3 darts at the board. I went to the Premier League and I saw a different Luke Littler. He just fancied the job. And when you go to Alexandra Palace, when you get on that stage, he'll fancy the job. And I think we can look at every start. I've got Peter Wright with real difficulties because Wesley Plessy is the guy I think could be the outside bet. Joe Cullen goes in there playing like a bag of nails until he gets on the stage. And also Dimitri Vandenberg is not the same player. I think only Dimitri could get to the semi-final of the Grand Prix on the back of, I think he's ranked 79th in the win ratio this year. He's just had a poor year, yet he's won a UK Open on a stage. He's reached a semi-final Grand Prix. All the seeds will be nervous. It's something Matt alluded to in a sense that you want to get to Christmas. You would then want to get into the competition there. And like I said, there's a lot of seeds who won't fancy the job, but for me, Littler stands out.
And just one other question on that you've just mentioned, that potential between Fallon Sherrock and Luke Littler. It really is remarkable, not only what the two of them have achieved up on that stage, but also with everything that comes with it. You know, you're thinking, who's the crowd going to be behind in that one? I don't think it matters, because they've both shown that whatever is thrown their way, whatever they've had to deal with, whether it's the media, press attention, people on social media, their opponent on the board, it doesn't really matter.
Two players who have been through, and it's something that you mentioned there, social media there, the scrutiny, and didn't Fallon handle it well and come through just as a better person in life. And Luke is well protected. Luke has a guy who seems to just be by his side everywhere. His parents have been with him since he threw his first dart. He's in an excellent management stable there. And, you know, he won't, when they're in that players area, you don't really hear the Ali Pali crowd a great deal. He'll be in that zone. It might be a shock to the system, but like a good boxer, it might take a punch on the nose for him to just settle down. And I think he'll come through any adversity. I think there'll be so much interest in the potential sports personality of the year. There'll be so much, but if anyone can handle it, it's Luke.
And yeah, if this year has taught us anything, it's to expect the unexpected, and that normally when you predict things, you're made to look quite silly. So I am going to put you both on the spot. You've mentioned it already, Matt. You think that Luke Littler is going to win the tournament, don't you? Who do you think he beats in the final?
I think we get what for me would be a dream final, and probably for the players would be a dream final, and certainly for the fans. And that is one of the most entertaining games of darts I have ever seen in 2024, or possibly the most enjoyable game of darts I've watched for quite a few years, which we saw recently, and that's Littler and Gary Anderson.
Matt, do you agree with that?
Just so you know, we spoke off air. And you know that game that Matt alludes to, I commentate that because I work for Sky and Matt doesn't, and it's the game that I fancy as well.
7 times.
I think I think the final will be Littler v Anderson.
Yeah, I'm going for the same final, but I actually think that Anderson comes through that and picks up his 3rd World Championship title. Just want to get your thoughts though. If it is that final, Des, I'll come to you first. What do you think the biggest fairy tale would be? Luke Littler winning it for the first time, or Gary Anderson making it 3, given everything he's been through as well, and the fact that 12 months ago there was talk of, you know, is he ever going to play on the Euro Tour again? Is his ranking just going to slip down and down? Which one do you think would be the biggest fairy tale?
You know, the Gary Anderson story is incredible. A guy I admired, that Rolls Royce throat, and, you know, to win back-to-back World Championships is one thing. He goes on the slide, he doesn't go to the Euros, and then all of a sudden he just starts practicing with Ryan Searle, apparently. And then everything is just going so right again. He gets on the floor and he's posted incredible numbers. It would be an incredible story. But darts, I don't think I've ever seen it in better shape right now. And that's because of Luke Littler. And if he can win the world title this year on the back of what he's done, on the back of what he did last year, that's the fairy tale.
Do you agree, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, Gary Anderson's one of the greatest players of all time, isn't he? I mean, whenever you say who's your top 5 players, most people will include Gary Anderson, who I did once beat with a 170 finish, just to let you know. But I think the same. Luke Littler would be a great story, but I also have worries about that story, because the chase is always more exciting than the goal. And if Luke gets it this quick, does that interest still stay there? And if he gets it this quick, does that interest then turn? You know, go back in the day, everyone used to hate Man United. And certainly for people of my age, people still like seeing Man United lose, even though we've not been winning for a while. Does Luke become that Man United team where the people then kind of don't have that same. They kind of want to see the fall of the player, don't they? After they achieve so much success, and with him getting it so early. I mean, I've seen people say darts is going to be boring now because it's going to be the Phil Taylor era again, where Luke Littler's going to dominate everything. I mean, I don't think anyone's ever going to dominate it again, but there's signs there that people aren't going to go with this story should he just mop up titles. So as much as it'll be great, is it great for the short term? Now, personally, I love it. I want someone to dominate it. I feel we need a dominant force within the sport. But I know there's a lot of people that don't like that. And there's a lot of people that love how it is at the moment with all these different winners and everyone being a champion. But I'd love to see Littler do it. But my concern would be, what would the reaction be? Would that reaction turn slightly?
I agree with a lot of that, but I will say I am one of those other people that really likes the open field at the moment. I'm happier without a dominant force. Want to get your thoughts on that, Duzza, before we wrap up?
Yeah, a great answer, by the way, Matt. I'll give you credit where it's due there. Never really looked at that. And I guess as my partner in the PDPA, well, the health and well-being of players, that motivation factor, that's what I admire, the longevity of the Michael Van Gerwens of this world, because I think with this podcast is maybe, and we've hardly spoken about Michael Van Gerwen, that might be to his advantage there. Look, it's just going to be a most incredible competition. We've talked about the main man in Luke Littler so much through that. He would be the fairy tale story for me, but just an interesting part of it. But Anderson, we all agree, is playing the most incredible darts. There'll be a lot of players watching this saying, haven't mentioned me. There'll still be plenty of stories that'll be told.
Yeah, really remarkable. Obviously, Gary Anderson averaging over a ton over the course of his 76 games on the floor this year. And it has translated onto the big stage since the European Championship as well. The quarterfinals there, semi-final of the Slam. Yes, he lost in the first round of the Players' Championship, but with an average of 104. So we've all agreed on the final there. We've got different answers on who we think is going to come out on top. But now that you have heard the thoughts of both Duzza and Matt, you're better placed than ever to take advantage of SBK's 25% winnings boost on the tournament winner market. So who will you be back in? As with all of the offers, T's and C's apply, 18 plus, and please gamble responsibly. Really can't wait to see how things unfold over the next 3 weeks. But that's sadly all we've got time for here. My thanks, obviously, to Matt and to Glen. But if you're new to SBK, then do not fear. All new SBK users can get £40 in free bets when they sign up and bet £10 for the first time. Whether it's football, horse racing, or just darts that takes your fancy, make sure you head over to SBK for lots of other offers and promotions throughout the festive period. As always, T's and C's apply, 18 plus, and please gamble responsibly. A reminder too that SBK will be giving you a winnings boost to use on every single day of the tournament this year, and a 25% winnings boost on the tournament winner market. Incredibly exciting stuff. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope you thoroughly enjoy your Dartmas.